So without further ado, I'm going to introduce two of my senior staff to talk to you about three of the topics: the electric storage, the electric vehicles docket, and the innovation docket. And if I can just pause the sharing for one moment so I can check my notes and do their introductions justice. So Josh Ryor, who's going to walk us through the electric storage and the regulatory sandbox presentations. He has recently been promoted to serve as the director of the Office of Utility Programs and Initiatives that we were talking about at the top of the hour. So that office, as I mentioned, is responsible for overseeing utility programs that we think are vital to delivering safe, clean, reliable, and affordable electricity. So some of the things that are under the purview of his office, as I mentioned, are the LREC, ZREC, SCIF programs, our arrears forgiveness programs, vegetation management, cybersecurity, and they're also, that office is also responsible for implementing the Equitable Modern Grid Framework. As part of Josh's team, Stephanie Cohane is the supervisor of our new Clean and Affordable Energy Unit. Some of you may know her from her work leading the one of the sprints in our affordability docket. She is now serving as the supervisor of that unit. So she works on a range of technical and policy matters before us and is leading the electric vehicle work. So I am going to turn to the two of them to walk us through these presentations, and let me get our slides back up and turn it over to Josh.
Thank you, Chairman. Great. Well, thank you. First off, I want to thank CT Energy Network, PACE, and Live Green for the introduction today and the opportunity to talk a little bit more about grid mod and the three dockets that Stephanie and I will walk through. So first off, the chairman mentioned that we have a unique docket numbering system. So for all of you that are interested in looking at the docket specific to electric storage and what we're trying to do there, you can see at the top of the slide, the docket number is 171203. Ryor 3, and I'm not even going to try and explain those numbers and why they are what they are. But so I just want to first start out with kind of a high-level objective statement for the docket. So for electric storage, our investigation, and that's really what these dockets are. They're kind of PURA investigations into different topics or things that have come before us. And so the objectives, at least as far as we see them, and based on some stakeholder engagement we had last year, are really threefold for this docket. The first is to find opportunities where electric storage can provide net present value positive benefits to all ratepayers. The second one, which really goes hand in hand with the first one, is to provide or look for opportunities, programs, markets that can help to provide multiple types of benefits from electric storage. I think we all know or are familiar with the term of the value stack or the concept of value stacking. And really what that's getting at is that storage, depending on what you tell it to do or tell it how to operate, can provide a lot of different types of benefits. And so it's about getting as many of those as we can to maximize that value to ratepayers. So we wrote a couple here, resilience, peak shaving, supporting the deployment of other DERs, but by no means is that an exhaustive list. I would say that generally speaking, the programs that are out there in states currently really usually, at least the programs at the state level, really focus mostly on peak shaving, but I'll get into that a little bit more later. And then the third one is actually kind of taking up the mantle from Public Act 1180 that said the sustained orderly development and really created a bunch of programs for the solar industry for the sustained orderly development of the state-based solar industry. Really, I think the objective here, and going back to one of our grid mod objectives more generally of fostering and developing the state's green economy, I think one of the objectives of this docket is to foster the sustained orderly development of the storage industry in the state. And then there's one other last point of that I wanted to mention before I move on to process. It's just a note in context. Some of you that follow the legislature might have seen raised House Bill 5351, there we go, from last session, that would have set a 1,000 megawatt storage target for 2030. Obviously, that the session was cut short, but I think that's important to keep in the back of our minds as we're working on this docket to kind of have a sense of where where the state's going with this. So next slide. Great. So just some additional process that I want to walk through and make everyone aware of. So like I mentioned, those objectives came from not only PURA's expertise, but engaging with stakeholders last year in a series of what we called solutions days. And why we called them solutions days, is the chairman mentioned, really with grid mod and all the tracks of grid mod, we tried to lay out and look at some of the quote unquote barriers to deployment of storage or any number of things, but really to turn that on its head and to say, okay, if it's a barrier, how can that then be presented as an opportunity? And so why we frame these as solutions days is we wanted to bring everyone together, the EDCs, stakeholders like yourself, developers, anyone that was interested that could help provide a solution to be able to achieve those three objectives that I listed on the previous slide. So as you can see there, we had 2 solutions days that we held, and both of those were actually also broadcast on CTN, and so the links are hyperlinked in this slide decks for anyone that wants to go back and watch. I want to say it's 10 hours. So you know, some fun weekend watching for you all there. So then after that, we took a lot of what we heard on those days and we put it into what we called a request for program design proposals. And really what that was is to say, I mean, the impetus for programs and utility programs at the state level across the nation, there's different origins for all of them. Sometimes it's from legislation, sometimes it's from dockets, like a PURA docket. But really what we wanted to do is we wanted to get the best ideas out there and the best possible proposals. So what we decided to do was to take everything that we heard and put it into a request for program design to get all of the best ideas on what those programs could potentially look like. And I'll walk through the key elements of those proposals and proposal designs, there we go, on the next slide. But a couple things I want to flag as part of those program design proposals was one that was open. It was open to any customer classes. So this wasn't just a residential program design that we were looking for. It was for any customer classes that we oversee. And then also is any configuration, whether that was co-located with solar or standalone. We are really interested in programs that met the objectives that I talked about on the last slide, not necessarily trying to pigeonhole it into this is the type of program that we're looking for. And then the last thing on this slide is just we opened that up on May 6th, and then on July 31st, we received 9 proposals in response to that. That gave varying degrees of input based on the different criteria that we'd asked for in the proposal designs. And the hyperlink for July 31st, it goes to all of those proposals if you're interested in looking at those. Next slide, please. Great. Well, so as the chairman mentioned, what we can talk about is what's in the public record, and what is in the public record currently are really the elements, the design elements of the proposal or the program design elements that we were looking for in the storage RFPD, as we called it. So the first one was program length. I think one of the important considerations here, and especially thinking about that third objective in terms of sustained orderly development, is how long of a program should we be looking at? Should we be looking at a 3-year program to see how it goes, or should we be providing a longer term pathway to really achieve that sustained orderly development? So that was, we had a series of questions around that. What's the length? Should we look at a megawatt deployment target, or is it a year target? And so that was the first question that we asked. The second question that we asked was really around program and technology eligibility. So I spoke to this a second ago on the previous slide. about, we really didn't want to prescribe to stakeholders that were responding. We want it to be co-located. We want it to be a commercial and industrial program. We wanted to see what are your ideas? Give us your best ideas. What programs and technologies should be eligible for your program? Are you designing a specific program that's just for LMI customers, or is it a program that actually would work for everybody? So we left that, like I said, up to stakeholders that provided those proposals, but I do think it's a key consideration. And like I said, lots of the other programs that are in our neighboring states, for the most part, look specifically at residential storage programs. But again, we wanted to look a little bit broader. And then I think kind of the two, I don't want to say biggest topics, but certainly the ones that get the most attention typically are around compensation structure and then compensation level. So what we mean by compensation structure really is there's fundamentally almost two ways that you can design or compensate storage under a statewide program. I'm generalizing here. But the first one is you can provide an upfront incentive, somewhat similar to our RSIP incentive that some folks might be familiar with for residential customers currently. So under that structure, you would get an upfront incentive to install the storage system, and then you would have operating parameters that you would either be asked to use, or that we would control the storage device and say it's going to operate this way. The other way you can do it is you can actually have a compensation structure that's based on performance or paid for performance. Depends exactly how you structure what you want to say. But it says, hey, we know if we're thinking about what's called peak shaving, and which is really just looking at trying to flatten our peak for the highest demand hours, which of course are the highest cost, and that's what our system is designed around. How do we incentivize storage to operate in those hours? So under that structure, it would be no upfront incentive, and it would just be based on how the storage system operates. So those are the two extremes. Of course, there's things in between, but so that was one question that we asked stakeholders to respond to. And then compensation level. What under either of those structures, how much should we be paying to incentivize the deployment of these systems? And there's a couple of different considerations there. Whether or not we're looking at the cost benefit analysis, but also thinking back to that 1,000 megawatt target, how do we make sure we're incentivizing these things to be able to meet that target, but also in a way that's the cost benefit analysis is positive, right? So those are the key questions and what we ask stakeholders to provide answers to. And then, so moving on to ownership and operational control model. I think there are two actually very separate things that I combined together for ease of this list. But ownership structure really is around who owns the actual storage device and gets the returns associated with it. Is it customers? Is it a third party? Is it the EDCs? Again, we are agnostic on the question or on the answer in asking the questions. We want to know what do stakeholders want, and what do they think is the best model. And then similarly, the question of ownership control, who has that ownership control? Do residential or C&I customers have control of that? Do third-party aggregators have control, or do the EDCs have control? And there's lots of pros and cons of the different models there. And I think the level of complexity of operational control, and also kind of the insights into what's happening on not only the wholesale market but the local grid are just some general considerations for that question. And then the next one is really a program administration. I think the chairman's response to the question about integrating third parties into the electric system currently actually got at this a little bit in terms of, for the most part, our jurisdiction is over the EDCs. And so like largely the programs that we oversee right now go through or are administered by the EDCs. And we asked an open question of, is that the model we should take here? Should we look at third-party administration? How exactly should we look at that? So I think that was a key question that we asked there. Next on E, M, and V, what we really looked at and what we're asking stakeholders to chime in on it, and for those of you with an energy efficiency background, you'll be familiar with that term, it is really verifying and measuring that we're getting the benefits of this program that we thought we'd get at the outset. Sorry. So that goes back to the providing a net positive return essentially to ratepayers. So confirming that that's the case. And really that gets into the next bullet point of cost benefit analysis. How do we do that cost benefit? What do we include? And then again, so we know the type of benefits that ratepayers are going to get. And then I know we want to leave a couple of minutes for questions. So I'll wrap this up with the last two real quick. With data privacy and security, I think a lot of the metering that goes with these potential programs and making sure that we protect the data and keep it securely is a really important consideration that we ask stakeholders to respond to. And then the very last thing with other considerations, which could not be more broad, I think the most important one to flag there is there's lots of other, and again, the chairman did a great job of giving this overview with what we call Ryo 9, which is another grid mod track. How does this fit into all of our other programs? We don't want something that's a one-off. We want something that's comprehensive, that moves the needle, that moves us to where we're going. So really, we wanted stakeholders to tell us, how does your proposal fit into the larger whole that we have in front of us? So with that, I guess I'll kick it back to you, Bert, for any questions that I can answer.